Thank you everyone for being here today. It's wonderful to see all of these beautiful women's faces. I wish we could be in person. Certainly that's how we prefer to do our conference, but this year didn't allow that. But we felt it was really important to connect and reconnect everybody, especially given our circumstances right now. So thank you for believing in this, and thank you for participating in this. And I've got the part of the housekeeping rules, but for those that have attended before, and I know we've got some past attendees who have heard this story before, but for those that are first timers, because I know we have a few newbies, which we always love to welcome into the group. This conference started as just an idea a few years ago that, I don't know, I had come to that point in my life, maturity can do that sometimes, where you realize that, you know, women so oftentimes don't lift each other up as they should. They don't support as they should. And I just felt, gosh, I just wish there were an opportunity for women to come together and realize, you know, how common we are, the common threads that bind us, and that we really should learn to lift each other up, support, and timing is everything. I met these amazing women and everything just fell into place, and I knew it was the right time. The steering committee that has worked with me believed in that same vision, and that's how this conference was born. So our goal with this conference really is to understand that we all have challenges, whether it's personal, professional, or both, and we want to own it. Yes, you have those challenges. Yes, you have difficulties, but owning those difficulties and saying, you know what? Okay, it's mine. I own it, but I know that I can get through it, and here are the resources, and there are people out there to help me reach that goal. So that's the vision of this conference. And I found a quote, and I'm sure I don't think there's a woman out there that isn't familiar with Brene Brown, but I found a quote which is now in my email that said, owning your own story is the bravest thing you'll ever do. And that just resonated for the Own It conference, and a great way to kick off this morning. So with that, thank you all for attending. Now let's get to my housekeeping duties. I would ask that you all stay muted while our sessions are going on. If you have a question during each of the sessions, you're welcome to put it in the chat. Questions can be asked at the end of the session. Janet, if I'm forgetting anything, remind me too. I would ask that you stay muted during those sessions. And did I forget something? I think I'm good with my housekeeping, right? It was stay muted, questions in the chat, or save them till the end, and then you can unmute yourself and ask your questions. And
if there is a question that you don't want to ask yourself, you can send it directly to me, and we'll read the questions all at once later.
Perfect. Okay, so with that, I'm going to introduce our first speaker in session. It's okay not to be okay, with Renee Carapella. No, it's the diversity and inclusion panel. I was just checking. Wrong notes. Let's go over here. Obviously, where we are right now, so many things swirling around in the world right now. Apart from politics, it's racial. We felt this was a really important topic to bring to the conference, and we've got a great panel for you. I know it'll be great discussion, a way to educate ourselves on how we really need to conduct ourselves and what we really need to know to make sure that everybody is included and make sure that we're having those right conversations. And for that, I would love to introduce Judy Rowe, who will be the moderator for the panel. I have a feeling everybody knows Judy, and thank you, Judy. So take it away.
Thank you so much, Denise. Can everybody hear me okay? Awesome. All right, so the one thing I would ask you to do for this session is to put yourselves on speaker mode, speaker view. Can you see it at the top right of your screen of the Zoom meeting? And it really allows for everyone that's on the panel to be seen when they're speaking so that you know exactly who's speaking when they're speaking. So welcome to the panel. I think this is a topic, as Denise just talked about, that's challenging, but it is brave when you come forward and you speak about elements of diversity and inclusion, because we are probably at the most divided we've been as a nation over racial injustice that exists in the world. So Black Lives Matter is one of the movements. People call it a moment, but it's a movement to create equality for everyone. And there's all kinds of elements. What I want to say up front is that although we may be talking mostly about racial inclusion, racial diversity, and racism, we absolutely honor from this panel all elements of diversity that include everything from sexual orientation to race, to gender, to any other identity that has to do with, whether you feel included or not unincluded in either the workplace, the community, and sometimes within families. Many times people are experiencing that as well. So I'll ask you to stay mute, but here's what I do want you to do. I want you to think about any questions that you have regarding how do you talk and be more inclusive with other people. So there's going to be a segment. Let me tell you how the panel's going to go. I'm going to introduce the panels in just a minute. I'm going to tell you all about them. Then I'm going to ask each of them to talk about specifically why this is important to them from their perspective, what it means the most to them. And then after each of the speakers have spoken, then I will then invite all of you to chat in a question. Please don't make me pull out my own questions, because I do have them just in case everyone's silent. But I really hope that everyone has an opportunity to share a question that they wanted to ask. And again, as Janet mentioned in the beginning, if you do not feel comfortable at all sharing your question to everyone, you can see in the chat you have an opportunity to send them to Janet directly. You can send them to me directly, or even Denise if you don't see everybody. Sometimes when you're in a moment, you don't see everything. So if you could do that, that would be lovely. I will tell you that this is an hour. It's an hour, and the topic is very, very challenging. It's complicated, and you can see that people are struggling every day. I struggle as a Black woman every day. And so it took 400 years in terms of racial diversity, and many, many other elements of diversity can say they've had their time to get here. It's not going to be solvable, certainly not in this hour. But what I hope is that you all take away an opportunity to have a conversation with someone, even if it's just yourself, or to learn more, or to reckon with how you feel. And so I'll start with a quote from one of my favorite authors. James Baldwin says, "Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced." So with that, I'm going to invite my panelists to join me. And so I would like to invite Carol Carney. By the way, we have East Coast and West Coast honored here. And so Carol, thank you so much for getting up early. Tara Seaver is local. She's a business owner. I'll tell you all about her. Carol Kane is here too. She is also local, sort of. She's on the very far East Coast. And we have Barb Whitman. Let me tell you a little bit about each of them. So Carol Kane, for over a decade, Carol has enjoyed a successful career as an award-winning travel blogger and freelance writer, sharing stories from all over the world, and working with a multitude of global high-profile clients, from MasterCard to Expedia, where she served as brand ambassador and spokesperson to Residence Inn by Marriott, and who awarded her for her inspirational family travel content, and a tout France, who recruited her to travel and feature wine regions around France for 3 years in a row. Before blogging, she had firmly established herself in the public relations and communications field, where she continues to work in community and new media outreach, project management, as well as in promotion of organizations and their partners. Her consultancy work also includes providing clients with a brand overview and improvement guidelines to appeal to ever-changing market interests and trends, in addition to using her platform to help brands succeed in this ever-changing media landscape. Carol also uses it to advocate for issues around social justice, racial equality, and immigration rights, often as a volunteer interpreter to those seeking asylum in the United States. Carol, would you say hello so everyone can see you?
Hi. Hi, everyone.
Hi, Carol. Welcome. Next up, thank you, Carol. Next up, we have another Carol. This is West Coast Carol, And Carol Carney has a commitment to equitable treatment of all people, and it has led her into a career as a compliance manager for a major bank in California. By staying up to date on the laws and regulations, she was able to ensure that the company followed all ethical and legal requirements. Currently, the objective of her continuing passion for equality, inclusivity, respect, and justice for all people, she uses her voice in spaces that inspire others to join in the movement of achieving more inclusive and a more just society. Carol Carney, would you please say hello to everyone from the West Coast? Carol?
Sorry,
Ah,
hello.
that's okay. You were muted, like everyone said. Welcome, Carol. Thank you for getting up so early today. She comes to us by way of Barb Whitman. We're delighted to have you here.
Thank you. Thanks for
Oh,
having me.
you're welcome. So next up, we have Tara Seaver, and Tara owns Laura Bell's Bakery in Corning. It has always been her dream to own her own bakery. The name Laura Bell's is dedicated to her beloved grandmother who taught her how to bake as a small child. Tara's mother and grandmother took care of their families by cooking meals, making beautiful desserts, and hosting elaborate holiday dinners. They both have been her inspiration in life and have supported her desire to pursue her goal. Tara's also part of the LGBTQ community here in Corning and proud to be a part of something so empowering. She supports and encourages her staff to be exactly who they are. She promotes Pride Month in June and welcomes people of all ethnicities, religions, and gender to visit her bakery where they will feel like they are at home. Tara, would you please say hello to everyone?
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Tara. Thanks. And thanks for getting up. And by the way, Tara may have to exit before the panel is over, but we're delighted to have you here today amongst your busy schedule. So thank you, Tara. So next up and not least is Barb Whitman. She's part of our conference committee. Barb is the communications and marketing director for Corning Stafford District. She spent 10 years in California organizing and holding women's retreats with the sole purpose of empowering women. Given the current climate in our country regarding equality and inclusivity for all people, Barb is passionate about staying informed and learning all that she can to be part of the movement. Her goal is to inspire others to join in and to be part of the movement to make change. She wants to remind everyone to get out and vote. So would you please, Barb, say hello to everyone?
Good morning.
Hi, Barb. Thank you.
Hello.
All right. So we're going to start with our first question. Remember, please, 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 as we begin and as you listen, chat your questions in so that we have the next segment, which is all of your questions answered or ready, primed and ready for the panelists to answer. And then we'll end with a word from each of the panelists after we have had the panel discussion. So first, we're going to start off with Tara because we know her schedule is incredibly tight. And the question for all panelists is, why is this topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion matter so much to you personally? So Tara, would you begin, please?
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I'm happy to be here. This topic means a lot to me, especially now. It's more imperative to have these discussions. It's with everything going on in the world, you know, it's definitely important to our community, vitally important to have these conversations. I feel empowered to speak of diversity and inclusion on a daily basis because I am part of the LGBT community. I've seen firsthand discrimination, how it looks and what it feels like. You know, some people they're quick to judge, especially by appearance. And I've encountered that many times. But I come from a large family who would never let anybody else treat me differently. So I've kind of taken that into my, as a philosophy into my professional life, and to make sure that, you know, one, that I don't portray that in any way, and that I make sure that everybody feels welcome in part of my life. But it's, I make sure that being in the unique position that I am to hire people for my business, for my bakery, I've made it very clear that everybody's welcome to apply for employment, that I welcome diversity and inclusion. And it's at the heart of everything that I do every day. You you know, I'm brave enough to speak about it, and it's embodied into who I am as a person.
Thank you, Tara. Thank you so much for speaking. Next up, we have Carol Carney. Carol, why is that
Hi.
important to you?
Well, much more than being a Black or white issue, I think it's a humanitarian issue. And I believe that until everyone is included, until we're all treated justly, there's no justice, not true justice. But how it has specifically impacted me is in my personal life. What I realized is that my life is surrounded with diversity, people in my life. And because of the climate today, what I was realizing is that the majority of my people who I loved for years, who did not look like me, my white friends, they were having a difficult time with just being comfortable with me, not knowing what to say. And I realized that this was an issue because it was dividing us more than bringing us together. And I decided to put a voice to it and take the initiative to address. I started a platform which is entitled Love Matters, because I realized at the heart of all of our issues, if we could get back to that space that loves, that respects, then we can begin to do the hard work and address those issues, which now is separating us as a society. I also realized that I needed to be able to show up completely, completely as a woman, specifically as a Black woman. And this time made me stop and think that I personally had not done everything that I could to further the movement, because I allowed myself to show up to make others feel comfortable with me. For instance, there were things that were happening in the world. The first thing that I remember is when Trayvon Martin was killed. And I'm in the business world, but in certain settings, I didn't feel comfortable in talking about it, neither did my white friends. And now I'm gonna show how having diversity in your life enriches your life. It allows you to have those difficult conversations. And the only person that I could talk to was Barb Whitman. And I can remember us sitting down for the first time after Trayvon Martin, and I realized this was the only person in my life that was not Black, that I could show up and be not only a woman, but a Black woman, and she was comfortable with it. So I think that we have to consciously have those conversations that allow us to be our authentic selves, not the conversations that allows someone to have to assimilate into making others feel comfortable with us. I think that this is a time, although it's a difficult time, it's a time which allowed us to own it. I love that, because as you were saying, own it, I think as women particularly, if we own all of what is going on in our lives, we own all of what is happening, then I think we can really move this movement forward. I think there needs to be a lot of listening, not a lot of assumptions of what you think the Black experience is, but have those conversations that would allow the Black women or Black people in your families to really show up and be their authentic selves. What I'd like to do for a moment is I would like all of us to maybe just close our eyes for a second and imagine the people in your life that you love, your children, your husbands, your cousins, your uncles. Now, as you imagine that, think of one individual or one person that you love that you would sacrifice for the movement of justice. I think I can safely say none of us would want to sacrifice any of our loved ones for justice. Yet there are parents, there are mothers, there are fathers, there are sisters and brothers whose loved ones have been killed for this movement. And then those of us who've not had someone killed for the movement, we live on a daily basis as Blacks, concerned about if our loved ones will come home. And so as women, if we can just think of all of the people who are being murdered and killed as our extended family, then I think we can have those conversations that says enough is enough. I think if we look at it more as a humanitarian issue rather than a Black or white, a them or us, we can really start doing that hard work that needs to be done so that we can really truly have justice for all.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you. Next up, we have Carol Kane. Carol, why is this important to you?
Well, I come from an immigrant family. Both my parents, well, my mom's Puerto Rican, which in some places is considered non-American, but, and a Dominican father. And I lived for a good portion of my life. I was born in this country, but I lived for a good portion of my life overseas. In addition to my work and travel, I also lived somewhere else. And so I always view, when you live overseas, you kind of get the privilege of viewing the United States from the outside in. And so what we're told, as an immigrant, child of an immigrant, what we're told is that especially when you're looking to venture into the United States, you're convinced, you're fed the idea that if you work hard enough, right? And that is honestly the American message as well. If you work hard enough, and you present yourself in very specific ways, and you demonstrate your commitment to professionalism and hard work and so forth, then you're rewarded. And the benefits of that hard work will come to you. And so what I've seen growing up, not only in my work with immigration and also just watching my family basically come from, being factory workers, and now I have the luxury of owning my own business. Like, that's a huge leap just in one generation, is that we have to work harder. We have to work harder because in addition to demonstrating all of the things that anyone would have to demonstrate for success or for opportunity, we have to break past the perceptions, and we have to break past a lot of the misconceptions that being a person of color or being an immigrant would bring. So I honestly have had a lot of benefits professionally, but I really don't think that I saw the impact of my life really change until I married a white man. So I literally did have to marry a white man, and then I was able to move out of a certain part of New York City into another part of New York City. All of a sudden, apartments became available. All of a sudden, shopping was a little bit easier. All of a sudden, my circle of friends became a little bit more white than they were before him. And so I noticed, I knew these things existed, but having married someone of another race really emphasized what that was. And so for me, I think that I had to make a decision very early on in my life, what kind of person I wanted to be in terms of vocalizing these issues. And for a lot of people will know, a lot of activists will know, a lot of people of color will know that being vocal in any way means to have to sacrifice certain professional ambitions. And so I don't feel like I made a sacrifice. I stopped working in corporate and decided to work on building my own business so that I could have the freedom to speak and do the work that I do. And I think that there's so many different elements and in so many different ways that I see where I don't have a privilege that other people so easily have or take for granted. And it's really important for me because I am the mother of 3 children. I, am the product of people who dreamt that something possible could be by moving to this country. And so I just feel that I don't have the luxury to be quiet and to be silent in many of these issues, regardless of what I might not get because of it. So it's really, really important and personal to me to kind of be vocal about this and be brave about speaking about these issues.
Thank you, Carol. Appreciate it. Now, I don't see anything other than comments in the chat. I really would love to see questions. Our last speaker will come up. There's a lot that's been said. What questions do you have? What concerns do you have? What do you want these wonderfully accomplished and the perspectives that exist here on this panel? What do you want to know from them? So please, please chat questions. And I'll introduce our last speaker, Barb, to bring this segment home. Thank you, Barb.
Good morning. I'd like to share what I've learned about white privilege. It's been an education for me as we maneuver through this movement, and I've really come to understand what white privilege is. I thought white privilege meant that you're wealthy and you're white, and I never thought of myself as having white privilege. However, I was raised in a middle-class home with no prejudice. My parents had Black friends who visited our home on a regular basis, so I grew up not seeing color. My mother in particular instilled in me that we don't see people as color. She was truly one of the most genuine, loving people I've ever known. She never met a stranger, and she was an example of accepting all people, and she was my greatest role model. So over the years, I have said, I don't see color, only to realize now how very inappropriate that is. My Black friends want me to see their color. In 2012, like Carol already mentioned, when Trayvon Martin was murdered, I remember feeling such outrage and anger and sadness. And coincidentally, Carol and I were getting together during that time to have lunch. And we had been friends for years. We'd never discussed race. Why would we? In my eyes, we are exactly the same. It was in 2012 that we started a discussion that opened my eyes just a little bit to what white privilege is. During that discussion, we talked about our college-age sons, and we are proud mamas of our boys. It was in that talk that I learned the difference between being a mom to a white son and a mom to a Black son. As white moms, we raise our boys to go out the door, be respectful, be kind to others, put on clean jeans, brush your hair, and don't be stupid. As Black moms, they say all of that. But in addition to that, they have to warn their sons not to wear their hoodies. Don't run away from situations. If you get pulled over, place your hands on the steering wheel and let the officer know every move you're going to make. I had no idea my Black friends worried for their son's safety every time they walked out the door, or worse, that their sons were not coming home. It was another eye-opener for me. But as outraged and saddened as I was, I didn't do anything or speak up. Fast forward to recent years now, here with everything that's happening in our world, I reached out to Carol again. Now, Carol's not my only Black friend, but she happens to be my sister by heart. And I asked her this time, what can I do? And that simple question opened up all kinds of questions from me with a wealth of information from Carol, educating me and not judging my ignorance. I learned of the pain she felt her entire life, to which I had no idea. And again, this is a very dear friend of mine, someone I considered my sister by heart. And I didn't know the pain that she was living in. So why is this topic important to me? Because I want to be a part of the movement. I want the change that needs to take place. I want to be a part of that. I want to stand behind my Black friends, my brown friends, my gay friends, and continue to educate myself and hopefully inspire others to do the same. Judy asked me the other day why this matters to me and why I'm getting involved in this movement. And I thought about it for 2 seconds and I didn't have a profound answer. My immediate answer from my heart is, why wouldn't I? It's the right thing to do, to love my friends of color, of different religion, same-sex marriages, whatever the case may be. Why wouldn't I stand beside them and love them unconditionally, as they've always done for me? So I guess you can say, I want to use my white privilege as a way to make a difference.
Thank you so much for your comments, Barb, and thank you to all the panelists. I do have several questions coming in, and one that I'd like to start off with has to do with experiences. And Tara, I know that you have to go soon, probably. If not, I'd like to at least get your input on this, if that's okay, if we go with you first. And I've muted everyone else, just so you know. The question came up from our panelists is that if it's not too painful, can some of you share some examples of what you've had to face day to day, how you respond to them, and deep down, how does this make you feel? How do you remain positive and not get sad, angry, etc.? And so this is where also Tara will start off. And then I invite Barb, Carol West Coast, Carol East Coast, and everyone to join in and just have a conversation. I won't try to intervene. Tara, please.
So, and Corning has actually made me, I guess they've been very supportive with me opening a business here on Market Street, especially the Gafford District. They've been very welcoming, very just, people I can go and talk to and feel comfortable talking to them. As far as encountering like discrimination or any, I can't really think of an example, but I do know that it happens a lot with my appearance. A lot of people will stare or kind of just, look at me. And it's almost like you can feel them looking at you. And you like to hope that it's not because you look different or, you don't look like them. But sometimes that is the case. And really what I do is just, I continue to be my authentic self. I just continue to be who I am. And I engage in conversation with customers. I just talk to them like they're human, just as I am. And they do get past that, and it makes it a little bit easier for me. But I find that that's the best way to deal with situations like that, is just to be who I am.
Thank you, Tara. Come on, anyone else on the panel, please speak freely to each other even.
I think that one of the things that I laugh at and, in my experiences was, and I mean, this is not at all the only experience, but it's one that I can laugh at, is when my husband and I were looking for a new apartment, and I lived in Washington Heights, which is a primarily Dominican neighborhood, which everybody assumed that I, was perfectly belonging in because I was Dominican, but I'm not from there. I'm from Brooklyn. I just happened to work there, so I lived there. But it was very people always assumed, oh, of course she's from Washington Heights, she's Dominican. But I ended up getting a job on the east side of New York City. And so I wanted to move there, and I could never manage to get anything. And then once my husband and I got married, and I was like, I want to get an apartment on the east side so I could walk to work. And we did. We ended up getting one right away. I never showed up for anything except for to sign the lease. And of course, I sang the whole Moving On Up song to the east side. So it was really funny, but at the same time, it was really painful and really enraging that I didn't have access to a lot of the world, or at least in the United States, unless, until I met him. So I think, that made me more aware of the opportunities that I didn't have access to for simply looking how I did or whatever. And I think that if, with regards to pain and anger, it's upsetting and it's angering, but at the same time, there's no time to waste. Like, really, we can't dwell on that. I have a life to live and I have a family to raise. You think about the fact that I have a house in New Jersey, but we ended up buying a house here in Finger Lakes. But that took a lot. That took like several years of consideration of where was it safe for me to live. And I don't know how many people get to have to go through that process of thinking, where can I live where I won't potentially be targeted. So a lot of my friends of color, my Black friends, are shocked when I tell them I live up here, because there's a perception of what rural New York is. So that's been, so now I kind of am representing a different side of this area, but it took a lot for me to be able to make a decision of where I wanted to live. And I think that, just living like that constantly, is it safe for me to live here? Is it safe for me to travel here? Is it safe for me to, even work here? Those are things that we constantly have to think about as a family, as a biracial family. That is exhausting, but you just kind of move on.
Anyone else?
It's not a one isolated situation. It's a day-to-day way of life, of having to always be aware of the space that you're in or where you're at. But specifically, I can recall, I live what is considered the suburbs of California. And I was on a call with Barb. I just happened to be on a call with Barb, and my neighbor, who is much, much younger, we call it a young couple in the neighborhood. She came in tears, knocking on my door and wanting to know if my husband and I were okay. And this was just at the beginning of the protest. And so our little city is 17,000, I think, and it's predominantly white. But downtown, there were marching of white supremacists against the Black Lives Movement march. And within my neighborhood, we started seeing, for the lack of not saying, N-words scribbled all over the neighborhood, throughout the neighborhood. And we've lived here for about 20 years. 10 of the neighbors probably are original. And this young lady probably has been here maybe 5 years. And out of all of the neighbors, she was the only one that came to the home and was concerned and about my husband and myself. I immediately knew that it wasn't that my other neighbors did not care about us. They just didn't know how to start those difficult conversations. And so again, I realized that there was a lot of work to be done. And I realized that although exhausting as it is, that I had to start those conversations that were difficult, because I knew that they cared for us, but it was just awkward. And so in terms of being angry, as a Black woman, I have consciously made the decision not to become what I despise. I refuse to allow outside influences change who I am as a person, my principles, my character. And so, as the other speaker said, this is not the time to be angry. It's a time to take those emotions and do something productive with them. And so that has been my approach all my life, is to be a part of the solution, to get involved, to make a difference, to make a change for justice. So anger doesn't play a part. It's trying to educate, and I call it willful ignorance, for those who don't take the time to educate themselves and understand why the fuss, why the big noise, why the riots, why the march, why the movement. So for me, I think it's about being involved in the change.
Great, thank you so much. Barb, do you have anything to add before we move on to the next question, because it's combined? And Tara, if you could hang with us a few minutes, it involves certainly something I think you could speak to as well. Barb?
Yeah, over the years, I've dated Black men, and I know that in those situations, being treated differently. That was really my only experience with dealing with actual anything like that. However, something that's happened, recently for Carol and I in particular, is losing friends because of my beliefs and how strongly I feel about standing up and standing beside my friend. We have both had friends that we've had for years, and only to discover that they have completely blocked us on social media. Now, I don't talk about a lot on my social media. I am on a private page, Love Matters, that we have open discussions. And it was from that she has decided, or these friends, actually it's more than one, have decided to completely block us. And I know the pain that made me feel. And it really intensified because knowing the reason for it, it hurt my heart even more that it was how it was affecting my friend Carol, who I'm standing beside. I don't want to say standing up for, I'm standing beside her. So I guess that's another area that I've received some sort of racism or,
Pain.
inappropriate anger. I'm very angry about it.
Thank you, Barb. Thank you. Now this is to all the panelists, and I'll start first with Tara in case you have to leave. I wondered, many people have put in the comments about how to start the conversation, how to address some of the issues. And what comes up is the fear of naming what that element of diversity is. And is this the right term? I know that is sexual orientation is the question. Is that the right term? How are pronouns used? People want to know education-wise, what does that look like and why is that so important? And then counter to that, we're going to move over to race, and we can talk about, people ask me all the time, well, Judy, is it okay to say Black? Is it okay to say African American? Is it okay to say she, her? What is they? What is binary? I don't understand all of this. So I'd like for the panelists to speak about that and your experiences with educating yourself and others with terminology and how important it is to you in terms of having these conversations. Tara, do you want to start, or I can start with somebody else, certainly.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I think when it comes to situations like that, when people aren't educated and want to be educated, I think it's, just ask questions. There's nothing wrong with asking questions. And I think that's the most important thing, especially right now, is just educating. That's to me, everything that I see, whether it be the news or day-to-day life, that seems to be where we're kind of missing when it comes to discrimination, diversity. Education is definitely something that is lacking. So I am more than happy when anybody has a question or they don't know something about the LGBTQ community. If they have a question, I want them to feel welcome to come ask me. I've made my bakery a safe space so that anybody that wants to come in here, they can, whether, where it doesn't matter where they come from or what their background is. This is a safe space. And if they have questions and want to be educated, I am more than happy to do that.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I think that asking questions is always good, and having the courage to ask questions is always good. I also think that there's so many resources out right now that people can really, if they're really committed to learning and they're really committed to sort of expanding their knowledge, that's something that I encourage everyone to do, because the truth of the matter is, like, even me as an Afro-Latina, you can go to another Black person, you can go to another, Black Latino, and oftentimes what I see is a lot of people search out the people who sort of align with their sort of whatever it is, their politics, or they align with what they want to already believe. And so one of the things that I encounter often is like, well, my Black friend said to me that it's okay for me to say this stuff. And so if that person said to me, even though it's wrong. And so we're not a monolith, right? And there are going to be people that are incredibly screwed up, and we all have, you know, we even in our own communities have our own issues that we're working through. We're also products of white supremacy, and so a lot of that is going to be instilled in some of the terminology that we use and some of the ways that we live our lives, and in some of our beliefs. So I feel like if you're ever in a conversation with someone and you feel uncomfortable and you feel challenged, that's probably the conversation that you want to kind of pursue. And that's probably the path of education that you want to pursue. If you have a conversation with someone and you feel completely vindictive and very comfortable in how you are and where you are, then that's probably not going to be the path of education that's going to lead you very far. So it's not enough to just ask a person, you know, someone from the LGBTQ community or somebody from, you know, of color, what their beliefs are or what their stance are or how they do things. Because again, even among our own community, we have problematic people that are not going to probably be the best people to get information from. So, I mean, just reading books and going out there and really seeking the information you want.
Thank you.
I just want to add to that, that yes, asking the difficult questions, we keep saying that, to find someone safe like Tara or Judy or whoever it is you choose to ask the questions to. But I think the most important part of that is be ready to listen and open up your heart to hearing the response and not just brushing it off, but just really opening your heart up to that. And like Carol said, there are books out there, there are fantastic books out there that talk about all different angles and all different ways to help understand what's happening in our world and how to understand people that are not like you. So I highly recommend that as well.
And I think this is the best time. The time that we're living in now fosters the wanting to know, the knowledge, because we are living in such tumultuous times, and we're all living through social unrest, that people are there that's ready to learn and to teach. And we as Blacks or LGBT, we don't have all the answers. So you can first start with those people in your immediate circle that you feel comfortable with. And as one of the speakers said, then you branch out. If you're too comfortable, you're not growing, you're not stretching, but it's a starting place to get comfortable, to asking those difficult questions, and then seek out for yourself. Again, I'm going to mention Love Matters platform. It started because of that. And the material that is placed on that is educational material. The people who are on there are people who are coming from all walks of life in different areas, West Coast, East Coast, and we're all challenging each other. We're asking those difficult questions. We're leading each other to the books to read or the documentary to watch. So there's so much out there. If you want to learn, there's no excuse not to.
Yeah, great. That's a great place to get to our final question. You all have been so engaging. Thank you so much for all that you've done. I will mention that we will save the chat. Janet will save it, and certainly, hopefully, if there's ever an opportunity for us to come back, or we can post something as a reference from the conference, because Jeannie graciously posts a list of library resources, that would be fantastic. Just for reference, Black encompasses all people of diaspora, of Blacks. It could be somebody from the Caribbean, somebody from Africa, etc. African Americans have a unique experience of existing in slavery in this country. So it is important to reference that there is a difference between being African American and a difference to being Black, although African Americans can exist in the construct of what we call a Black American. Okay, that makes sense. So I'm going to leave you all with just some opportunities to, card carrying carries many of the resources that were shared here. And thank you to Elizabeth for all those resources. So I'd like for all the panelists to, and Tara, I'm so glad you're able to stay the whole time. I would like for you to somebody asked, will this ever change? Will there ever be equality and justice for all under what we pledge the allegiance to in this country? I'd like for you to answer, do you have hope that that can happen? And then the other thing I'd like you to ask is to challenge or one thing that everybody can listen to that you would advise them to do to make a difference and be more inclusive and educate. So please, anyone can start. I already have you up on the screen, Carol. Do you want to go first?
I'm
Or do you want
hopeful,
to-
terminally optimistic. But I do believe that in terms of making a difference, I think that we should be anti-racist. And by that, I mean no tolerance. And that's in our circle of influence. We can all make a difference with the people that are in our day-to-day lives. You don't tolerate the innuendos, the racial jokes, the slurs. I think that's where we can really make a difference is with the people who we come in contact on a day-to-day basis. And in terms of will we ever have, I think it's possible, but we as a people, we must want it, we must want the change and be willing to do the work to do the change. It's not going to be easy because systemically, our country is based on racism. So it's going to be work. It's going to have to be intentional. It's going to have to be changing because I personally don't believe you can just change laws to change racism. I think that we have to change within ourselves. It's a mindset. It's a thought. It's how we raise our children, what we accept from one another. So possible, I'm hopeful. And I think that if we just change our own circle of influence in terms of what we tolerate, in terms of our day-to-day interactions and conversations, that's a beginning spot.
Thank you very much, Carol. Who would like to go next? I missed an opportunity to have Kara before she exited, so.
Oh.
That's okay. No, it's the moderator has that.
I think that because this conference is hosted by the Corning Chamber of Commerce, I'll talk on a business sort of executive perspective. I think that, one of the things that I hear often in working with a lot of business executives and people who represent the area is the want to have more diversity in the area, right? The want to attract a more diverse professional demographic into the area. And the truth of the matter is that that's going to take a lot of that's going to take sacrifice. We talk a lot about, Barbara talked about, white privilege. And what I always come across when I talk to people, executives who say that they want diversity and they want inclusion, is the lack of understanding that in order for that to happen, this idea that, oh, we need to have diversity at the table. The one thing that people don't realize, you're not adding another seat to the table. You're literally taking somebody who has had the privilege at the table for years, and you're asking them to stand up so that they can make room for somebody else. And I think that when a lot of people who have maybe gone up the chain of command or professional chain of command for a prosperous position, the moment you tell them there's a possibility that you're going to have to get up and give that seat to somebody else, it represents diversity and inclusion that you talk about, that's when they don't want to do it anymore. And that's when the job becomes really hard. So I think what people need to understand in terms of the business realm is that you're not giving an opportunity to someone who doesn't deserve it or who isn't qualified for it, but you're going to have to seriously consider giving an opportunity at the expense of somebody else who went up the chain of command believing that they're entitled to it. And that's confrontational and that's conflicting. But if we want to really start talking about diversity and inclusion, and we really want to start talking about changing the landscape, then we need to change the landscape in our offices. We need to change the landscape in our businesses. And we need to change the landscape in our community. Like voting political positions are great in terms of laws and so forth. But if we want to change our community, that's something that needs to happen from a business perspective, and sacrifices. And I call them sacrifices because they, you know, for many people they are. Sacrifices need to be made, so that there is, that seat is available for someone to come into. And that's where it gets really difficult. But I mean, that for me that's what diversity and inclusion looks like. And it's where the hard work really is for a lot of people.
Thank you, Carol. Next, please. Carol, Barb, you're the last one. Bring us home.
Well, from a personal perspective, I'm hopeful, and I believe that there will be change. I know it's not going to happen overnight, but I'm hopeful in our youth and the younger generation. My son is 32, and that generation is taking this on so passionately, and they're encouraging youth and their peers to get out and vote and to be a voice. And so I'm proud of them, and I'm hopeful that they are going to be a part of a big shift in this movement. And like you said, Judy, it's not a moment. This has to be a movement that continues. And this discussion today, I think we're just scratching a surface. I think that we could spend the entire day discussing this, and everybody has a story that is personal to them that they've dealt with. And for me, I would just encourage everybody to step out of your box. Being brave is just, it's dealing with something that you are afraid of. So be brave and ask questions and open your ears and listen. That's the change.
Indeed. Thank you so much, Barb. Thank you, Carol, Barb, Carol. And, you all have been fantastic, and Tara, since she had to leave us. But here's what I'd like for everyone to do right now. I like the way Carol began with closing your eyes. What I want you to do now is to close your eyes again and imagine what it looks like for you to take action. What does it look like for you to do something to move this movement along? And it could be something as simple as examine. I think it begins first with examining who you are and what do you believe, and challenging those things that no longer serve this opportunity for everyone to live in this country equally. So I'm going to ask you to close your eyes just a minute. And I want you to think about, what does the world look like when you imagine equality? And then what can you do? Okay. And if you had an idea or thought of what you can do, even if it's just examine yourself, going online to look something up, having a conversation with somebody that you intended to, write it down, because what you write down can be remembered and served and moved forward. And so I want to express, oh my gosh, such gratitude for all these wonderful women on the panel. You are extraordinary. I love your voices, and I know that you're making a difference. And so continue on, carry on. And I wish you health, strength, love, peace, and action too, all of you. So thank you so much for this time, Denise and the committee of Own It. It's a wonderful opportunity, and I wish you all well, happiness, and success. Thank you.
Thank you.
Judy, thank you. Carol, Tara, and Barb. This panel reminded me one of the platforms that this conference was built on. And I heard a couple of words through that panel, is the authenticity and the acceptance. This was a personal and emotional conversation. And for those that have not been part of the Own It conference before, this is exactly what we do. The issues are tough. They do get emotional, but we have to talk about them. And that's how we learn through these. And, to everyone's point, listening is so critical right now. And I've learned a lot. It's reminded me that, you think there isn't a white privilege, but there really is. And so thank you to each one of you for sharing your stories, Sometimes it's not easy, but we definitely, we can't move that needle until we start having more of these conversations. So thank you so much for that. So moving from that, we're going to move to our next segment, which is, and speaking of difficult issues, as the committee was looking at the conference and how we wanted to frame this, we felt, again, given the circumstances and everything that was going on around us, that we wanted to partner with a community organization and donate a portion of our proceeds to that, which is, and again, a difficult issue, but certainly escalated by the confinement and the pandemic, was domestic violence. So we felt this was just the appropriate match, and we checked with Arbor Housing, and they were delighted to partner with us for their domestic violence program, create awareness, and to help the community know that there is a resource out there for them. So it is my pleasure to introduce Susan Bull, the Chief Operating Officer for Arbor Housing. Susan.
Thank you, Denise, and good morning, everyone. It was absolutely, we were certainly delighted to be invited to be a recipient of a portion of the proceeds for our domestic violence program. I had all my notes prepared so that I could keep confined to my time frame. I didn't factor in these power punches of information and inspiration that I would be sprinkled with from that panel. So I'm just so excited to have that be the platform to listen to all of these powerful women really talk about owning your story and having the opportunity to be your authentic self, and how critically important that is in any place that we position ourselves, whether we're advocating for others or building ourselves to get to a place to be able to enter into really good, meaningful conversations to have impact in our community. So when we stop and think about the privilege of having that permission and safety to really be our authentic self, it's something that it's easy to take that for granted, especially in a season of going through all of the turmoil that our country is facing, that's really unfolded in the last 4 to 6 months. So I just want you to think for a moment about what it means to create safe places. And in our community, as Arbor Housing, we're really honored to be able to have an outlet and a place with our domestic violence shelter to provide that safety. For, our messaging has always been for women and children, and I'm reminded that that's been our message, but that's not the truth. We are available for any person in the community who's experiencing domestic violence. Some scary statistics for you: 1 in 4 women and 1 in 4 men will experience physical violence from an intimate partner in their lifetime. 1 in 3 women, 1 in 6 men will experience sexual violence from an intimate partner in their lifetime. It's so scary, and it's so isolating, and it's can put people in a position that they just don't know how to reach out and get help. We have some, continued great topics later of it's okay to not be okay. But if you're not okay and you can't even imagine what safety looks like, how do you take that step to move on and find your own story and be able to own your own story of being empowered to go from a victim to a survivor? So our shelter in Steuben County, we have a 14-bed facility that is open and operational 24 hours a day, all year long. And we provide temporary shelter so that victims can come to us. They can have a safe place to rest. They can have a safe place to eat, sort of just take a time out and reset, get connected to services so that they can start to plan their journey to go on to be a survivor and decide what it is that they're going to do to move into safe and affordable housing. What's the next step in their career? How do they take those next steps? And we can't do that really without support. And again, we thank you, Denise, the Chamber, the Planning Committee of Own It, because donations are so critical to continue these services. We have an amazing staff who they're so incredibly good at their job to really take care of people when they come into shelter. But the truth of the matter is that the funding has been fragmented since its inception over 20 years ago. It's a tricky thing to be able to continue to pipe the funds into that pipeline. So I just want to say thank you for that support. I also want to encourage everyone who's on this conference to be on the lookout this month. October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and we are joining with Chemung and Schuyler counties to launch a Safe to Say campaign. And again, I love this Safe to Say. It ties right back in beautifully with the conversation that we've started, and I'm sure the conversation that we'll finish here today. People need to know where is it safe? Where can I go? So I just want to encourage you to, we'll launch that through our social media before the month is through, but think about for yourself to make that choice that I'm going to be a person, I'm going to be a home, and I'm going to be a business where it's safe to say, I need help, I need services, I'm not okay right now. So I just want to thank you again for this wonderful community, this wonderful platform. I knew I was coming in with a heart of gratitude, but it's just amplified so much. So again, Denise, I thank you so much. And just, I welcome you to enjoy the next segment of the conference. I'm going to put our domestic violence hotline number in the chat box. If you do not have that hotline number, please just jot it down so you know how to share that with folks. And thank you again for the time.
Thank you, Susan. And thank you for the opportunity to partner with you. Okay, moving on to our next session. Now we get to announce it's okay not to be okay, which is a great segue from Susan and her conversation. So our guest speaker is Renee Carapella-Johnson, who is a licensed mental health counselor. Renee has spoken at the conference before and has done an incredible job. So Renee, take it away, please.
Thank you, Denise. I'm just going to share my screen with you guys. Okay, so can everybody see my screen okay and hear me okay? All right, good. Seeing some thumbs up. Okay, so as Denise said, my name is Renee. I'm a counselor. I have a private practice in Savona called Ray of Light Counseling and Consulting, and have had that practice now for a little over a year. And I get the opportunity to do different workshops and trainings like this. And I'm really honored that you guys asked to have me back. So thank you so much. So as I was thinking about preparing for this workshop, this session, one of the thoughts that kept coming up is we have to be able to focus on what is within our control. I think a lot of time and energy can be spent on areas that are outside of our control. And so I wanted to talk about that and identify healthy changes that we can make to support during this incredibly challenging and difficult season. And to know that none of us are immune to this. I will be very honest. Janet, last Thursday, I got a call Wednesday night really late that my kiddo's school was going to be closed Thursday and Friday. I had a full caseload on Thursday, and so I'm trying to juggle all these things and navigate my kiddos' remote schooling, as I'm sure many of you guys are doing too. I have a kindergartner and a second grader, and my kindergartner had this assessment that had to be done on Thursday. It was something that he was supposed to do in school, but I got to do it. And it was just one of those moments of such overwhelm and, tears. And I thought, oh my goodness, it's, this is so hard right now. And then I remembered, it is okay not to be okay. And to get to something that Susan mentioned, is it's okay to not be okay, but we don't have to navigate this alone. And so I hope that, you all feel kind of a sense of community, that we are in this together. And I did get through that time, and I did call a friend and I just talked it through. And so I think that's something to remember, and that's something I'll talk a little bit more about as well. So these are two images that I wanted to share. Maybe you've seen them pop up on your social media. that really kind of highlight what, what is within our control and what is outside of our control. And again, many of us are grappling with feelings of powerlessness and helplessness and our own anxiety. And we're trying to manage those feelings while also navigating doing our work in a very different way, navigating home life in a very different way, our social engagements. And so again, I just really wanted to focus on kind of what is in that circle of control. And I also wanted to acknowledge that there are a lot of common themes, but we're each being impacted in different ways as well. And part of that's because of what's happening right now in our present world. And it's also because maybe things that we've experienced in our past are also being activated right now. And so there's no simple fix, no one size fits all approach. Yeah, I just want to say again that we are all in this together. Many people are describing this time that we're in right now as a collective trauma. And so again, I hope you feel a sense of community, a sense of knowing you're not alone. And I believe if there is kind of one simple answer, it is this power of connection. So before we get started, and I was thinking about this, I know this is going to be a little bit different because I'm not there with you, but I wanted to kind of lead you all in a really, really brief 4 or 5 minute kind of guided meditation, because I know that many of you right now in this moment are holding, again, your own feelings of powerlessness or anxiety or grief or anger. And I want to help you be able to kind of just center and ground yourself so that you can hear some of the messages that I'm going to share. So if you feel comfortable, what I would encourage you to do is just kind of get in a comfortable position and just start with noticing your breath. If you would like to close your eyes, you can do that. And again, just notice your breath, feeling it come in and then exhaling out. And again, try to take some nice deep breaths and have your exhale be longer. When we have our exhale be longer, we're activating our parasympathetic system, which is our rest, our pause button. And I want you to just kind of notice and concentrate on your muscles. See if you're holding any tension anywhere. Pay special attention maybe to your shoulders, your neck, your jawline. A lot of us tend to hold tension in those spaces. Consciously just lower your shoulders and let them relax. This act of relaxing your shoulders allows you to become calm because it places your body in a relaxed, easy position instead of a tense one. And now notice your hands and just let your hands be open, loose, and relaxed. Let your arms just rest by your side and just let go of all the tension that you're feeling and just settle into that space of relaxation. And just mentally scan your body now, noticing any areas that may be tense. And if you notice tension, concentrate on that area. Breathe into that space. Imagine that space opening up. And just allow your muscles to give up any of the tension that they've been holding. And now I'd like you to notice your thoughts and imagine each affirmation that follows and believe each one to be true. You may want to repeat each phrase silently in your mind after I say it. I am relaxed. I am grounded. I am focused. I am resilient. I am brave. I am calm. I am part of a community. Again, now just return to noticing your breath. Breathing in and breathing out. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes and join me back in this moment. And I hope everyone's still awake and I didn't put anyone to sleep. But again, I hope that just kind of helped you to get to a place of calm. And that is something that you can control. We can control how deeply we inhale and how long our exhale is. That is something that we can control. So I am noticing just a couple, oh, I lost them. I was noticing a couple of questions that were coming up and I just wanted to take a really quick peek. Or maybe Judy or Janet, if there's anything that you guys, if anybody's having trouble, what I think I will do is I'll just save questions for the end. But if there's anybody that's having any technical issues, let me know that. So, okay. So I loved this quote, suffering arises from trying to control what is uncontrollable or from neglecting what is within our power. So when there's so much chaos, outside and around us, how do we create this sense of calm and stillness within? Well, I do think that one of the ways is through, meditation, and that doesn't have to be a long, 20 or 30-minute meditation. As you could see, we just did a couple of minutes of just kind of checking in and having you scan and see what you're feeling physically, emotionally, and mentally. So even that act can help with that sense of stillness within. And I did share a resource list with you all. And under that, there's some wonderful apps that I shared, some websites, some links. So you can check those out if you're really new to kind of meditation and what is that all about. So I also wanted to talk about this amazing woman, and some of you may be familiar with her work. I had the chance to hear her speak actually just last week, and I thought, I have to include this woman's message. It is so beautiful and so amazing. So Valerie Carr is an American activist. She's a documentary filmmaker, a lawyer, an educator, and a faith leader. And she recently wrote this book called See No Stranger. And I haven't had the chance to read this book. It's on my list on Amazon to purchase. It was just released this last summer. And so when I watched her talk, she spoke about this time that we're in right now and how she felt 4 years ago when what was happening politically. She said the only way that she could describe it was that it felt as though it left her breathless. She could only compare it to the last stage of labor, when the contractions are coming so fast that you can hardly catch your breath and you're in so much pain that you feel like you might die. She said, that's how I felt 4 years ago. And she's like, in some ways, that's how I even feel now. But she said this quote, this question came to her mind, and this is what she has held on to that has helped her, is what if this is not the darkness of the tomb, but the darkness of the womb that we are in right now? What if on the other side of this darkness that we're in, there is a birth to something different, something better, A whole workshop could be dedicated to Valerie and her amazing work. And I did include her book on my resource list. She has an amazing website. She has some amazing TED Talks that I would encourage you to check out if you're not familiar with them. But she did do a little practice in her interview that I watched that I'm putting a little bit of my own spin on, but I wanted to share it with you all today. And if you don't have a pen or paper, you might want to, grab one. I think, was it Judy who maybe, I can't remember, somebody said something about the power of writing things down. And I truly believe in that. So what I'd like you to do is just pause for a moment and kind of reflect and think about, what do you most need from this time that can come from within you? Is it a sense of calm? Maybe things just feel so frazzled and so overwhelming that you just need calm. Maybe you need more compassion. Maybe it's compassion for yourself or compassion for others. Courage, resilience, whatever it is, just write it down. And then I want you to think for a minute, kind of reflect on, where in your body does that reside? So maybe if you are seeking compassion, maybe you imagine that coming from your heart. If you're seeking wisdom, maybe you imagine that coming from your mind. Calm, when I think about calm, I think about I need to slow my breath down. So it's my lungs that I think about. So connect with that. And then I want you to identify an image that represents this quality for you. So maybe you want a sense of calm, and with calm, you connect that to a beautiful ocean or a cabin in the mountains, or maybe if it's compassion, you see a heart. Just take a moment and just kind of think about, what's the first image that pops in your mind? So what is my hope, or what is this that I'm trying to give you? Let me try to put it all together for you with a personal example. So when I think about right now, and I realize too that what we need moment to moment probably changes too. Like right now, what you want in this moment may be very different, to what you might need tonight or tomorrow or next week. So right now in this moment, what's coming to my mind is I need patience. There is so much that's kind of going on, and mostly I think about I need patience for my children, with the learning, with the pressures of that, and managing my practice and all this. I need patience with them and with myself, and I connect that again to kind of, I guess, my lungs and needing to slow things down. And the image that I think of with all this is my daughter on a balance beam. She does gymnastics, and balance beam is probably the one that she struggles with the most. But it's beautiful to watch her because she just takes her time, and she doesn't pay any attention to anyone else around her and how fast they're going or what they're doing. She's focused, and step by step, she's going to get to the other side. She's going to get to where she's going. And so I think about, in those moments when I feel like I just need to slow things down and I just need patience, I'm going to take a breath, and I'm going to see that little girl on that balance beam. And I'm going to take a deep breath, and I'm going to, maybe even put my hand over my heart, and I'm going to take a couple seconds and just connect with that. And again, everybody's practice with this might look a little bit different. This might not be something that resonates with you, and that's okay too. But I wanted to share it because I think sometimes, we do need to pause, and we need to remember that everything we need, your courage, your strength, compassion, and love, is already within you. And I believe that wholeheartedly. That's part of my, kind of mission with my counseling, is that we have the answers that we seek already within us. We just have to quiet the noise around us and be able to connect with that. So finding ways to do that in whatever way you can, whether that's with a meditation practice or doing something like we just did with identifying an image that you can quickly connect to. But connect with this part of you as often as you're able, and connect with your own inner light, your own power, and your own wisdom. So what else can we control? So the concept of compassion, especially compassion for yourself, this whole term of self-compassion might be kind of foreign to some of you. But let's take a step back and just for a minute kind of take notice of this extraordinary time that we're living in. You know, our work-life balance has always been a struggle. But now, you know, we are trying to navigate that typical work-life balance while this whole new normal, or trying to create this whole new normal. You know, I know for me personally, I went within 48 hours back in March, I went from, you know, doing in-person counseling to having to do everything via teletherapy. And I had never done teletherapy before. So, you know, wanting to be a support to the person or the people that I have the honor of working with while also navigating a whole new platform was hard. And I know many of you are continuing to navigate challenges at work. You know, so meanwhile at home, you know, things are completely kind of turned upside down, right? And for many of you, you're maybe even still working from home. And I think that blurs the lines between work and home even more. And even if you have returned to work probably looks very, very different. And I'm sure you're continuing to navigate changes that are happening, you know, daily. And you know, we're navigating all these changes. There's a global pandemic, as we've talked about. There's just, you know, the unimaginable political events, social events. I don't say all this to add stress. I'm hoping I'm not increasing blood pressure here. What I'm doing by saying this is I want you to remember that we are human. And I think sometimes we forget that. And we are, you know, when we're not feeling okay, it's probably a pretty normal response to some pretty unimaginable circumstances that we are trying to navigate during this time. So remember that, you know, when I shared, you know, earlier what was going on for me last, you know, Thursday morning, it's taking a step back and reminding myself, you know what, I'm human. When we have those moments where we just want to cry, or we just want to scream, or we just want to take a nap, you know, when we think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and some of you may or may not be familiar with that, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but a lot of us are kind of functioning at survival mode right now. And so we have to remember that, and we have to have compassion for ourselves. And I do believe in my resource handout, I included a website, and if I didn't, it's a super easy website to remember, selfcompassion.org. So, you know, go there, check out some of the resources. Kristen Neff is the one who coined this term, self-compassion, and she has a lot of beautiful work and quotes around this term. So I also wanted to bring in, this is a wonderful book. Some of you, again, may have heard of it, Under Pressure. This really kind of talks about the epidemic of stress and anxiety in young girls and women. And it's for anybody that's raising young girls or working with young girls or young women. And it offers a really different, powerful perspective, on stress and anxiety, and addresses stress and anxiety in many areas. So, and this was written, you know, pre-pandemic, but there was a message that the author, Dr. Demore, and I hope I'm saying her last name right, shared in this book that, again, I wanted to kind of bring into this space with all of you today, is reflecting on where our time goes and how it is spent. And so, and again, I know things have shifted and changed in some ways. For some of us, we have a lot less on our plates. You know, our kiddos don't have the extracurricular activities that they typically would. Our social engagements have changed or lessened. For some of us, this may not be the case. And we may still feel like we're, you know, kind of booking ourselves back to back to back. And we don't really account for when life happens. And so what Dr. Demore talks about in here is that we have to, these are her words, we have to make sure that there is slack in our system. And what she means by that is that if you have an unexpected open space in your calendar, just leave that be. Maybe don't think about what can you fill that space with, but that's the space for when life happens, so that when you get halfway to, your kids' school and you realize you forgot their coats and you have to turn around, it's an annoyance and not a crisis. So things like that. And, another area that I do think that we have some control over, and again, in some ways more so than others, is with our schedule. So I think just, again, kind of taking a step back and where does your time go? And I'll touch on this, not wanting to get off on too much of a tangent, but even just being mindful of your social media use and how much time gets lost scrolling, and, I know that's something that many of us, I think, struggle with. And maybe it's on my mind because last night I watched the powerful documentary on The Social Dilemma. And if you have not seen that, you should check that out on Netflix. But just, again, kind of taking a step back, and is there any shift or any change in your schedule that could allow for just a little bit more time? So I think that's all I want to say with that. And then this is just something I wanted to share. I loved this. And again, maybe some of you have seen this. It's a public service announcement to parents. But I think really in a lot of ways, it could be for anybody that, what we're being asked to do is not humanly possible. There's a reason we're either working parents, stay-at-home parents, parent, or a part-time working parent. Working, parenting, and teaching, they're 3 different jobs. It's not hard because we're doing it wrong. It's hard because it's too much. So we need to be able to do the best we can. And again, I think that this is really geared more for parents. And but I think for all of us, in many different areas of our lives, it's not hard because we're doing something wrong. It's hard because it's too much. And so when we have to choose connection, and, this talks about choosing, connection with your children, but I would say, choose connection with a friend, connect with your tribe in whatever way you need to. I think that's something that's so important. We can also control how we treat other people. And kindness is a wonderful way to let another struggling soul know that there is still love in this world. And what I want to share now is, again, I know I'm talking a lot about, some personal stories or things that I'm experiencing. I hope they're resonating with you. But we cannot control, and we want to control other people and how they treat other people and what they post on social media. And we can plant a seed. And what I mean by that is, and again, I'll share an example. I have a family member who was, posting some things on, social media that I felt like were just harmful, and hurtful to other people. And ultimately, I know I can't control what that person chooses to put out there into the world. But I did have a difficult conversation with them and say, this is how I feel when I see these posts. And I think that other people might feel the same way. And I would just encourage you to maybe think about that. And then what they do with that is, I can't control that. I can control whether, I say something. And in this instance, I did choose to share. And I can control what I post and what I put out into the world, whether it's on my personal page or my Ray of Light page. And I choose to post healing and courage and kindness and love. And that's what I can control. And I can hope that maybe resonates with other people and encourages them to share with other people. But ultimately, I can only control my actions. And I think there was a comment that came up, in the chat box earlier, someone, even a small pebble can make many ripples. I loved that. It was something to that extent. And that's kind of what I think of, I can post these healing things and I can hope they make a positive ripple. And I can voice, if I find, that somebody, in my life is posting something that I think could be hurtful or harmful, I can choose to share how I feel, but ultimately what they do with that is on them. And that can be hard to accept. And I'll talk a little bit more about that too. This was just something I wanted to share. This was something I did, I think, back in April. So some of the things may or may not, apply as much. But one of the things I did, back in March and April is I tried to put out these little, 4 or 5 minute inspirational videos for people. And I did a Ray of Light Kindness challenge where I just encouraged people to do these random acts of kindness to lift people up, that there were a lot of things in our world that were canceled, but kindness was not canceled. And so I just wanted to share this with you all as well. And we can also control what we eat and what we drink. And this might seem, really obvious, but I think sometimes it is, overlooked. And I can't remember, it might have been Philomena. There was somebody at last year's conference who, she said something that just stayed with me, and it was, we are what we consume. And that is, I think, in a lot of different ways, with what we, what we eat, what we drink, what we consume, in social media and such. But our nutrition, staying hydrated, getting enough rest, exercise, this kind of forms, is our foundation. And so if we're hungry, if we're thirsty, if we're sleep deprived, that's going to make everything harder. So I'm not going to harp on this an awful lot, but I did want to bring it up because I do think that it is important. I love this quote. So we can also control who we engage with, and who we spend time with, whether that is our virtual time engagement or our in-person time engagement. We need to really spend time with those who replenish us, who build us up, who allow us to be our real, authentic selves, who don't judge, who don't condemn, who don't make us feel smaller, but make us feel, larger than life. Be with those who make you laugh, who you can have fun with. And like I said, I just loved this, be around the light bringers, the magic makers, the world shifters, the game shakers. They challenge you, break you open, uplift and expand you. They don't let you play small with your life. These heartbeats are your people. These people are your tribe. So think about, who is in your tribe and be really intentional about connecting with them as much as you can. We are social creatures, and research shows that, social connection is vital. It's a critical buffer against stress and anxiety. And I know that right now with social distancing, and I'm even trying to shift my way of saying that. Instead of social distancing, I'm saying physical distancing. I need to, maintain some physical distance from people, but I should not be socially distancing from my tribe right now at all. If anything, I need to be connecting with them now more than ever. So keeping that in mind. The power of nature. I did not include this in my resource list. Partly because I just started reading it a couple days ago, but I'm reading this book called Your Brain on Nature. I think that's, Your Brain on Nature, Your Mind on Nature. It's a beautiful book, and it just talks about, the power of just getting outside, just taking some deep breaths. I think I could dedicate an entire workshop, entire session on nature. We are part of nature. I really believe that. And I think that we need this connection, and to be deprived of that creates, suffering in its own right. So thinking about how can you incorporate, again, whether that's maybe even just stepping outside and taking some deep breaths and, feeling the cold fall, air on your skin, or taking a hike or going for a walk or going on a bike ride, whatever it is. This is a picture of, one of my most favorite places. New Hampshire is one of my most favorite places. And we went up Mount Washington this last summer and the summer before. And so this is just a picture from our drive up Mount Washington, which if you've ever taken that drive, it's a beautiful scenic drive. It's also a little terrifying, but the views are worth it. And so wanted to highlight this as well. Spirituality, and again, I know for some of us, this, our faith is so critical. And I know that's been hard, for people who, get a lot of replenishment and peace in church. And I know for many, not being able to go to church or not feeling comfortable. But I know many services are being, they're online. So not losing touch with this, if this is a critical piece for you. And again, I kind of think about, how do I want to say this? Being in balance, and it's our physical health, it's our mental health, it's our emotional health, and it's our spiritual health. And we need to make sure that each of those areas we're tending to in whatever way we need to. And I think sometimes spirituality is the one that can get lost or overlooked. But I think for many, this is really vital. So the power of gratitude, something else that's within our power and our control is our expression of gratitude. And so I wanted to share this story with you. And I don't think I shared this last year. I share this at a lot of different trainings and workshops that I do, but I don't know how many of you here, and if we were together in a big room, I would ask you to raise your hand if you've heard of the ship, the Olympic. And I would guess maybe there might be one or two hands. And then if I were to ask, okay, who has heard of the ship, the Titanic? I bet every hand would go up. We've all heard of the ship, the Titanic. And we haven't heard of the Olympic because the Olympic was the sister ship to the Titanic. And she sailed without any incident until the early 1930s. And that's why we haven't heard of her. We tend to remember and kind of focus on those Titanic, those disasters, those tragedies. And we do this on a day-to-day, think about it. At the end of your day, you tend to look back on those Titanic moments, right? The one or two moments that did not go as you had hoped. And we overlook our many Olympic moments. Even very small, simple things, like your car started this morning, or you had electricity, or you were able to enjoy a really nice hot cup of coffee, or you have an unexpected, time this morning to join with some amazing women. We overlook these things. And so I would encourage you to also be intentional about gratitude practices. And, even if that's, maybe starting your day before your feet even hit the floor, identifying one or two things that you're thankful for, or ending your day being really intentional about those Olympic moments. Okay, what are you grateful for? So that was another piece. I'm trying to give a lot of different areas that I feel are within our control. And my hope is that you will resonate with even just one of them. And I think gratitude is very powerful. So I also wanted to share, this is another book. There's the old adage that, it's not what happens to us in life that makes us feel a certain way, but the meaning that we attach to it, how we think about that situation or circumstance that we're faced with. And I wanted to share, I'm actually going to read this paragraph from this book called Trauma Stewardship. Now, trauma stewardship is an everyday guide to caring for yourself while caring for others. And it is for anybody that it is in any kind of helping profession, educators, teachers, counselors, nurses, doctors, law enforcement. I could go on and on here. And I wanted to read this because I feel like this was a really powerful part of this book. I encourage you to remember that nothing has to change in the world for us to transform our own life experience. This may be difficult to accept. We may be committed to repairing society on multiple levels, and we may think about our work in relation to large questions of justice, equality, and liberation. We may feel that if we focus on ourselves, we are abandoning our mission. But the truth is that we have no authority over many things in our lives, but we do control how we interact with our situation from moment to moment. And so I just thought that was so powerful. And when we look at another area that we can control, it is our thoughts and our feelings. And sometimes, we do feel like we're, kind of consumed or overwhelmed by emotions, and that we, are struggling with changing our internal experience. And that can be for many, many reasons. And I just want to say at this point too, that if you're sitting here and the things that I'm sharing, the things that, I'm recommending, you're in this place of such overwhelm that you can't even get out of that. I have some resources at the end that I will share. And I would also encourage you, if you're feeling that way, this also might be the time to reach out. Again, it's okay not to be okay, but you do not have to navigate this alone. So getting back to this book, Trauma Stewardship, we're all being exposed right now in our own ways to this, as I mentioned earlier, collective trauma. And for many of you in your own work on a day-to-day, you are also exposed to the suffering of people. And we have to be able to take care of this. We have to be able to take care of ourselves in the midst of this work. And so I just want to highlight this book as a resource, especially if you're in a helping profession, because it gives some wonderful strategies, again, for just basically, how do you care for yourself while caring for others? And again, recognizing that none of us are immune to this. I did not go to counseling during a pandemic 101 in my graduate school. So, I'm not immune to what's going on around us. None of us are. So again, reaching out for support, and this can be a lovely resource for you. And I think we also have to practice good self-awareness. One thing that we can also have within our control is to just be checking in. And we kind of did this earlier with the meditation, right? I kind of had you just do a quick body scan. Are you holding tension? Are you holding stress anywhere in your body? And I think doing that practice, even throughout the day, take a couple seconds and just take notice. Okay, how am I feeling in this moment? Am I feeling stressed? Do I need to move my shoulders around? Am I thirsty? Do I need something to drink? Do I need to just get up and kind of stretch or move my body? Kind of listen within and honor what you need and notice. So these are some of the warning signs that in Trauma Stewardship, the author Laura Vandernoot-Lipsky talks about, and she talks about how often we get to this place of complete burnout, overwhelm, vicarious trauma, and we don't recognize it until we have some kind of meltdown, until we get really sick. We kind of, we might have headaches, and what we do is we take some Tylenol and we just push through, right? We don't take a moment and kind of pause and say, hey, am I getting a headache because maybe, I'm overwhelmed, or maybe I haven't had enough to drink today, or maybe I went to bed way too late last night and I'm just overtired. We have a tendency of just kind of pushing through and ignoring our own inner, indicators that we could be feeling more stress. So I think, and I feel as though in our society, and someone I think kind of maybe mentioned this, maybe it was, Carol kind of talking about, well, just, kind of push through, work harder. We have this mentality of just pull yourself up by your bootstraps, get done what needs to get done. And so we don't really have this practice of checking in, but I think that having that practice can really make all the difference. So setting healthy boundaries, again, this could be a whole workshop, right? All too often the opinions of others cloud our instincts and our intuitions. You know what's right for you. It's just a matter of getting quiet. Do you see a theme here with my session? This quiet, this stillness is so important. When we get quiet, we can hear our inner truth. And there's a YouTube video there on the bottom. I'm not going to watch that just because I know our time is limited, but it's a wonderful video that talks a little bit more about, just setting those healthy boundaries, being able to, to say no when we need to. So letting go of what you cannot control. So just kind of a reminder of, things that are within our control and outside of our control. And I knew I would be kind of, this would be at the end of the presentation, and I wasn't sure how much time. So I just picked a couple things that I felt like were most helpful for me in my own reflection in terms of thinking about this whole idea of letting go, because I know that this can be really hard. And this is something that I work with a lot with people that I have, the honor of seeing. It's, well, I know I can't, control what this person does or think, but I really want to, right? So I think one of the things is even just kind of taking a moment, you don't necessarily have to do this now, but even just taking a moment and kind of pausing and thinking about what is really hard for you to let go of control. Is it how others react? Is it, predicting what other, what will happen, or the actions of others? Once you've identified kind of what you're focusing on that is outside of your control, then just kind of asking yourself, why is it hard to let go of that? And there's a quote, and this quote that I'm reading is actually from the article that's posted there on the slide, and it is, people cope with uncertainty in many different ways. Some of us embrace it, and we find opportunities and we find gifts, and we turn that discomfort of uncertainty into a more positive experience. I need to be more in that direction. I'm working on getting more in that space. But others, go on to, catastrophizing and this feeling of out of control, which, just makes them strive for any kind of control that they can tightly wrap their hands around. And in the best of times, we tend to seek control in order to have a feeling of safety. Control is ultimately the ability to influence a desired outcome or uncertainty. But the truth is, we have very little control over anything. Think about it. Are you really able to steer most situations toward full certainty and a desired outcome? There's too many external factors that come into play. So here's the shift that was so powerful for me that I want to share with you, that I just kind of keep thinking about, is that, and it's just a shift in words, that while it is true that there are many situations that we do not have control over, we can always stay in command of our reactions, our actions, our attitude, emotions, thoughts, and intentions. So if we can just shift, yes, it is true that I can't control what's going to happen when I'm going in or facing X, Y, or Z, but I can remain in command. And I think that's so beautiful. And I think that's what I would encourage you to maybe just kind of shift and change that, to kind of bring, the heart of this conference, right, is we can own it. We can own like our reactions, our actions, our attitude, emotions, thoughts, and intentions. And how empowering and beautiful is that? So I'm going to, and I loved, you can see that I'm really big on quotes, right? Quotes and reading, but it takes a lot more courage to let something go than it does to hang on to it, trying to make it better. Letting go does not mean ignoring a situation. Letting go means accepting what is exactly as it is without fear, resistance, or a struggle for control. And again, I just want to say that if you are in this space of, this is lovely stuff, Renee, but I am really, really feel like I'm drowning here. I'm really having a hard time. I'm sure many of you know about the New York State Emotional Support Helpline. And I'll offer, if you want local resources, I think my information, my email, I want to say maybe was, and if it's not, I can type that in the chat box. But, if you're looking for some local resources, you can feel free to email me. I can certainly be a resource and support as well. And then lastly, I saw this a while back, but I just thought this was so beautiful. And so I'm going to end with just reading this. When this is over, may we never again take for granted a handshake with a stranger, full shelves at the store, conversations with neighbors, a crowded theater, a Friday night out, the taste of communion, a routine checkup, the school rush each morning, coffee with a friend, the stadium roaring, each breath, a boring Tuesday, life itself. When this ends, may we find that we have become more like the people we wanted to be, that we were called to be, we hope to be, and may we stay that way, better for each other because of the worst. So thank you so much.
Wow. Thank you, Renee.
You're welcome.
For those of you that have not been at the Own It conference before and heard Renee, this is exactly why we asked her to come back. She has this just amazing ability to bring us back to the center and remind us, particularly as women, that we don't have to control everything, that we don't have to be okay, and that it's okay not to be okay and control that which we can. Wow. Renee, that actually brought tears to my eyes. So thank you. And meditation has never been one of my strong things, but I have to tell you, that brief meditation that we did at the beginning, incredibly helpful. Thank you so much for being part of Own It.
Thank you for having me, Denise. That means so much.
All right, and now it is. Whew. I'm sorry, I'm trying to regain myself.
Oh.
It is my extreme pleasure to introduce our featured guest speaker for today. There's a lot I could say about Chris, but I will stick to the bio. Chris Sharkey is President, Community Engagement and Corning Enterprises with Corning Incorporated, where she leads Corning's community and economic development initiatives, as well as the philanthropic work of the Corning Incorporated Foundation. Chris started her career with then Corning Glassworks in 1980 and spent the first 20 years in a variety of plant, business, and corporate financial roles across many of Corning's businesses. I need glasses. Okay. In 2001, she joined Corning Enterprises, taking on initiatives in childcare, education, and economic development, and was named to her current role this year. For the years, Chris has been committed to advocacy and support of women, both professionally and in the community. She helped launch the Corning Professional Women's Forum in the 1980s and served on the first women's quality improvement team at Corning, one of the 20 original kitchen table crowd that launched the Fund for Women of the Southern Tier in 2009. Chris led the organization for 3 years, during which the fund's endowment reached its $1 million goal, and a 3-year partnership with Arbor Housing and Development, one of Own It's beneficiaries, as the first Empower grant was established in 2019. She serves on a number of nonprofit boards, including Three Rivers Development Corporation as the chair, Corning Classic Charities and Wineglass Marathon, chair, Corning's Gaffer District, Southeast Steuben County Library, Steuben County Industrial Development Agency, Finger Lakes Wine Country, CSS Workforce New York, Elmira College President's Council, and Fund for Women of the Southern Tier. Chris is a graduate of Kenyon College, and she and her husband, John, split their time between a home in Gang Mills and a hunting cabin in Troopsburg. She's an avid baker, particularly when it includes chocolate, and I can attest to that personally. She and John have 2 grown sons. Chris, please.
Well, thank you, Denise, and thank you everyone for hanging in for the morning in this unusual setting. I will say it's particularly difficult for me to say no to Denise. And when she asked me to do this, she kind of doubled down and she had Dawn Marie Castellana ask me. And then she doubled down again and I found out Judy Rowe was going to be here and I'm like, oh my God, what have I signed myself up for? So At that point, panic kind of set in, and I realized, I think they're expecting me to speak with some kind of expertise, like the keys to the kingdom on managing through the crisis. And I can assure you that that is not the case. So if you want to save yourself some time, you can go ahead and sign off now. But what I am going to talk about is I have learned some things along the way in my personal and professional journey. And that is what I would like to share with you today. So let me just share this. Okay. So, the first thing I want to say is that, crises come in a whole bunch of different flavors. I mean, this pandemic is certainly one of them, but, pandemics, yeah, we wish this pandemic was sudden and short-lived. But some crises are very short. They happen quickly. They're over. Some, like this one, seem to never end. They can have a small impact zone, or they can have a global impact. Crises can be self-inflicted. They can be things that we caused ourselves to be in a crisis, or they can be ones that are totally outside your control. Crises can also be a situation where lots of people are looking to you to provide leadership. And sometimes they can be just one person needing you to lead them. They can be a personal crisis, and I'm going to share some of mine throughout this talk. They can be professional crises, or they can be the absolute worst kind of crisis, which for me means if you're having a high stress time at work and there's no dark chocolate in your desk drawer, it honestly doesn't get much worse than that. So there is something in common about all these different kinds of crises, and that is your ability to successfully manage through them or lead through them has some very common elements. And so what I'm going to share with you is what some of those 10 lessons learned for me have been. So the first, you'll never have enough information to make the perfect decision when you're in a crisis. And this pandemic has certainly schooled us all in working through information vacuums, confusing data, conflicting experts, and that uncertainty and fear can really paralyze you. But in a crisis, you have to act. If you're in a leadership role, others will look to you to do just that. And if you're in charge, you have to take charge. So how do you do that when you don't have enough information? Well, the first thing I look to is who can I rely on? Because let's face it, not everyone is good in a crisis, particularly if the effects on them are deeply personal. So you need that kitchen cabinet, preferably with varying viewpoints, preferably with people who are going to challenge you and disagree with you, and ones who most importantly understand that the enemy of the good is the perfect, that you just have to do the best with what you can and what you know at the time, and be prepared for people to criticize you for it. Because it can't be perfect, others will weigh in. You have to be ready for that. Now, one of my unexpected roles during this pandemic was managing donations of PPE that Corning was making to communities where we had operations around the country. That was not something I ever had experience with in any prior role, right? And so actually the first thing I did was I had to identify the healthcare systems across the country where our employees were, who needed PPE. I had to determine how to allocate it fairly. Then I had to run it up the flagpole to senior leadership and get it all shipped out within a week. I then received a totally unrelated email from someone I'd worked with in some other capacities in the past, who was really a process-focused person, able to work seamlessly across different groups. She was really unflappable and had a tireless work ethic. And she made the huge mistake of mentioning that the project she was working on had been put on hold. And if I needed any help with anything, to give her a call. Well, in that moment, she became my go-to as we navigated something we'd never done before. We never actually saw each other in person in doing this, but we're in constant communication, and we likely won't ever be in that situation again. But she was one of those people who became a real right-hand person for me on a project that I needed to respond to very quickly. And just for the record, I never did ask her if she regretted sending me that email, but I think I can probably guess the answer. So next, you have to prioritize ruthlessly and carefully. A crisis, as we've heard from many different speakers today, is one where lots of unexpected things are happening. So how to balance and choose is a real leadership challenge. So for this one, I'll share a story that goes back a ways, and it's one of, quite frankly, a personal failure. Believe it or not, Hammond Lake in Tioga, Pennsylvania was the site of the Women's Intercollegiate Rowing Championships in the mid-1980s. Corning Enterprises at the time, and I would at that time have no idea I would come back to lead this organization, but they were leading this effort and they asked me to be the race director for that race. It was just a month before the races and their director had quit. So in addition to my regular job, I took that on. Now at the time, I was 26 years old. My only leadership roles dated back to high school and college. And I did this press interview, and it was an eerily clairvoyant moment because the interviewer asked about the weather. And I said, well, I don't really worry about the weather unless it's windy. And for those who aren't familiar with rowing, rowing shells ride very low in the water. They're very narrow. So a wind coming and working up white caps and turbulent water are not a rower's friend. Well, I should never have said that. The wind was so intense, the tents and food for the food vendors and everything collapsed. As race director, it was my call whether racing should commence. Now, I was weighing a lot of factors. I was weighing the weather against the travel complexities of hundreds of rowers from all over the country, flights needing to be rescheduled, accommodations and transportation being an issue if we delayed. And so I decided to go ahead. It was a mistake. And within half an hour, I had 5 boats swamped and sinking, dozens of athletes in the water. And as you may know, rowers don't wear life vests and their feet are laced into the boat. So the weather crisis had now become a rescue crisis. And fortunately that day, I had an amazing crew of rescue boats who quickly got all the rowers and equipment out of the water and to safety. But it was a really powerful lesson for me about how much prioritization mattered. Because sometimes prioritization means choosing only one priority. And in this case, it should have been safety over everything else. So those are some of the tough discussions and decisions that you have to make. So what does this mean? You don't have to be a leader to be a leader. Well, the fact is there's no title or secret decoder ring that goes with being a leader. In fact, it's often not the person with the title that leads in a crisis. So I'll share an embarrassing story from my past, and it actually relates back to the chamber. For those who have been around a while, you may recall that the chamber used to host an arts and crafts fair on the campus of Corning Community College throughout the buildings in December. It had hundreds of vendors spread throughout spaces on campus, and they all had to move in an insanely short period of time on a Friday night. Well, I was on the chamber board at the time, and I dragged my then 10-year-old son along to help. And both my sons will say they got voluntold to do a lot of things being part of our family. And we had to lay out the booth space. Well, we were over in the commons, and it turns out the measurements on the drawings that the college had were actually not correct. They were not the correct dimensions for the commons, and our layout was not going to work. And so we had vendors arriving in just hours. We were in a crisis. And there were 5 of us, I believe, there, board members, staff. We were really intelligent people, and we were completely paralyzed by this situation. So then the 10-year-old took the measuring tape and started marking the floor without any idea if everything was going to fit in his new scheme. And within half an hour, he was directing us all, and we finished before the first trailer pulled up to unload. So sometimes the leader is the one who just acts at the time that it's needed most. And now at 28, 18 years later, that son still subscribes to his often wrong, never in doubt mantra in life. So number 5, technology helps. I mean, where would we have been in this crisis without Zoom and WebEx and Microsoft Teams, FaceTime, Google Meets? The fact is that every crisis demands communication. In fact, it might be the most important part of crisis response. Being transparent, communicating frequently, even if you have nothing new to share, is important. And we communicate in ways so far beyond our voice. So I always opt for video on. You heard Denise remind all of you at the beginning, please put your video on, let us see you. All of those platforms support video, and it's an important step closer to human interface than audio alone, particularly in a time like this, where the safe response is not to be together. It makes it so much more personal. And haven't we loved all the kids popping into meetings for a snack, cats wandering in front of the camera, colleagues sharing their below the camera dress code? So it is an important part of bringing us together, but at the same time, don't rely on it too much. We can all share stories of epic virtual meeting failures. 10 minutes of getting someone's audio to work, screen sharing gone horribly wrong. I had a meeting a couple of months ago that was really a nightmare to schedule. You know, I was literally threading the needle of 30 minutes of time to get an impossible group together. And what happened? Zoom dropped me from my own meeting, and I, as the host, couldn't get back in. That in and of itself was a little crisis. But there's another reason not to rely too heavily on technology. Technology works best when you know exactly what you'll need, which in a crisis is the opposite of our uncertain reality. So what do? Well, basically you plan scenarios you won't use. So that sounds like a waste of time, but it really isn't. A common characteristic of crises is you don't know how the story ends. Different variables come in at unexpected times in unexpected ways. Your path to success is how quickly can you respond to those changes. So think about the multiple paths being pursued on a vaccine today. Aren't we all glad that we're doing this seemingly duplicative effort. So for this one, I'm going to share a personal story. And I've seen some of the names on the call, so some people will be familiar with this one. In 2018, I got a phone call from a physician on a Sunday night on a cruise ship that was in the waters off northern Norway. My 86-year-old wheelchair-bound father, who had embarked on a very independent month-long cruise by himself, had fallen out of bed, broken his hip, and had double pneumonia. And I would need to meet the ship in Copenhagen in 3 days and get him to a hospital. So the next 2 weeks were a roller coaster of unexpected obstacles, an accelerated lesson in the workings of the Danish healthcare system, which, by the way, if you're in Europe and get sick, rush to Denmark. It's an unbelievable healthcare system. There were accommodation challenges, endless discussions with airlines, medical evac companies, rental car companies. And so by the end, I had no less than 5 different scenarios booked on how to get my father home, hoping against hope that just one would work. Because obviously I only used one, but that was a crisis where absolutely everything was outside my control. And the only way to navigate it was to have a whole bunch of choices. And having those choices made all the difference. So sometimes you're asked to lead when no one has to follow you. Those who have been around a while may remember the renovation of the Centerway Walking Bridge. If you look at my picture, it's actually the backdrop behind my my Zoom. It's my Zoom backdrop. It was a $5 million project that restored everything down to the piers of the bridge and added the beautiful landscaping that you see behind me on the screen. It involved removing the entire deck of the bridge, as well as working down into the piers themselves. So how do you do that? Well, you have a lot of jackhammers. So the bridge sits right next to the east wing of Corning Inc.'s headquarters building. In fact, right next to the beautiful glassed-in conference room where senior leadership conducts a conference call with investment analysts after the close of each quarter. So during that time, there's a little inside knowledge. The whole area around that conference room, in fact, around the whole wing, has to be quiet. There's no lawn mowing, no window washing, and certainly no jackhammering. So I get a phone call and someone from Corning saying you need to ask contractors to stop work for 45 minutes during the call. So I very feebly tried to remind them that this was not a Corning project. This was a City of Corning project, and that kind of fell on deaf ears. So I found the name of the project manager, explained the situation. He then explained to me all about the penalty clause in his contract for being late on completion of the project. And if he stopped, he'd miss a window for a concrete pour, which would set him back 7 days at $11,000 a day or $77,000. So for that amount, he'd be happy to suspend work for me. Well, so I called my Corning contact and explained that, and it got very quiet. And they said, well, that's interesting, but you still have to find a way to make him stop without paying him anything. I was down to less than a week to get this solved. So I called the city manager and explained my dilemma, and he confirmed in detail the late penalty clause in the municipal contract. And he said, well, let me think about what I can do. So the next day, the project manager calls me. And he says, so I hear you make really good chocolate chip cookies. Well, I said I'd been known to make a few, but how did he happened to know that. Why was that coming up? And he said, well, the city manager suggested I ask for those cookies around 10:30 Monday morning for a longish coffee break. Well, I jumped at the chance. So at 4 a.m. on Monday, because I wanted them to be fresh, I wanted them to be on break for a long time, I was up baking 15 dozen chocolate chip cookies, which I handed over the construction fence to the project manager at 9 a.m. and I held my breath. So at 11:30, the email came through from the quiet police saying all had gone well and thank you to everyone. So I finally exhaled. But the epilogue to that story is I got a call from the project manager the week before the next quarter's earnings call, asking for, you guessed it, cookies. I said, but you're halfway down the bridge. You're not near the East Wing anymore. And he said, yeah, but they were really good cookies. So I happily bake them again, but it always reminds me that sometimes leadership is needed, even when it's not your job. So number 9. So we did a little meditation before. That is a really good thing to do every time you're in a crisis, particularly if one comes on suddenly. Just be calm, calmer, as calm as you can possibly be, because the fact is that others take their cues from you. So in a leadership role, you have the ability to fuel or de-escalate the emotion of the crisis. The best leaders don't have all the answers, but they transparently and calmly deal with the crisis at hand. And we can certainly point to those steady hands who have done just that in this pandemic. Jacinda Ardern, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, Angela Merkel of Germany, Tsai Ing-wen, the President of Taiwan. Is it a coincidence that they're all women? I think not. They exemplify gathering disparate voices around the table before setting their course, and the result has been some of the lowest infection and death rates in the world. And most importantly, they brought a calmness to their leadership and messaging that made following them easy. So I'm going to share a very personal story on being calm, and I went back and forth about sharing it, but I think it's appropriate. I learned how important this was in an entirely different crisis for me. I have a son with a case 1 autoimmune disorder. Now, for those who have traveled the path of autoimmune diagnoses, they are winding and frustrating. And having a case 1, which means it's the first in the world, was a 3-year journey which landed us at the National Institutes of Health. My then college-age son was transported from campus to the Bethesda facility by ambulance in an autoimmune flare. NIH was actually excited to be able to work with him while in an acute condition to see what treatments made a difference. And having been doing this for 3 years, my bag was packed. I settled into the on-site family lodging for what I knew would be a couple of weeks of watching the experts work. Now, it's never a good thing when you arrive the next morning, coffee in hand, at your loved one's hospital room, and there's a sea of doctors and nurses outside. So overnight, in an attempt to control the pain, the medical staff had accidentally administered too much fentanyl and put my son in respiratory arrest. In fact, it was the first time I had heard of Narcan or naloxone, something that's become all too familiar to us now in the opioid addiction crisis, but it saved his life. He was moved to ICU, being watched full-time by someone whose sole job was to make sure he kept breathing. Yep, it was a bona fide crisis, and it was also distinctly personal. But I knew I had medical information to process, calls to make to my husband, as well as my son's lacrosse teammates who were waiting in the lobby to see him. I also didn't know what condition I'd find him in, and I knew that the panic anger, and terror I was feeling had to be put aside through the crisis. So why do I share such a personal story in this crisis? And I think it's because this crisis is profoundly personal. It's life or death. It threatens our children, our parents, our grandparents, our friends. It's impacting the quality of education for our children. And those emotions that I felt that day are very close to the surface, likely for all of you, your family, your friends, and those who work with and for you. Which brings me to the final lesson of crisis leadership. Above all else, be compassionate. Realize how much the fear, the unknown, the pressure has on all of us, your coworkers and families and friends alike. Because when we look back at this crisis, what will we remember? In all likelihood, it won't be the brilliant ideas we had or the incredible programs we launched or kept on track. It'll be the support, the checking in, the kindnesses that we witnessed or that we dispensed. So what does that have to do with leadership? For that, I go to one of my heroes, the late Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She said it best. When a thoughtless or unkind word is spoken, I've got to best tune out. Reacting in anger or annoyance will not advance anyone's ability to persuade. And so before I close, I just want to share a couple of personal notes on the advice front for all of you, which is don't forget about yourself, which has been a wonderful morning of all of you investing in yourselves. Stay away from the donut vendor. So this is Sunnyside Bakery is at the Corning Farmers Market every Thursday. You can tell yourself that those donut holes that you buy don't have that many calories, but they do. And I myself struggle with stress eating, and this pandemic has brought that on. So this is a funny way of saying, take care of yourself, eat right, a message we've heard from others as well. It also should not surprise you that Sunnyside Bakery had a record summer at the Corning Farmers Market. Surprise, surprise. Be specific about what you need from the people around you. And I think sometimes as women, it's hard to ask for what we need. We assume people should be able to figure that out. Your closest girlfriends probably will figure it out. They're also the ones that will tell you, you know, you have spinach in your teeth after lunch, or, you know, you have a fly on your head for 2 full minutes, a fly on your head. Yeah. But sometimes other people around you, no matter how much they love you, aren't as intuitive as that. So make sure you tell them, do you need advice? Do you need someone just to listen? Do you need just a hug? Because that may be the only way they will know. Have your unplug activity. We've heard about that this morning. Mine is jigsaw puzzles. I will tell you there is nothing that is a bigger waste of time than a jigsaw puzzle, because you put all these pieces together and then you put them all back in the box and put another one out. But for me, during this pandemic, this was my unplug activity. I will just say on a personal note, wearing hoop earrings, earbuds, glasses, a mask at the same time will either rip the earrings out of your ears, or you will lose your earbuds, one of the two, or both on a really perfect pandemic day. And finally, get a dog. You know, and this was a little tongue-in-cheek, but as I listened to this morning, you know, dogs are really the perfect example of what we should be. There's no judgment. There is such compassion. They are always happy to see you. They really have been the real winners in this particular crisis, because so many people have realized having a dog, turning to some level of comfort that that dogs bring is something that makes a huge difference. So now my true confession, so this is Remington. He's actually not my dog. So the confession is I convinced my older son that since he was in business school, that his dog would be much happier living with us, and it would save him all of the trouble of having to go back and forth between class to let the dog out. So we basically kidnapped the dog, and we have had him. He has been our comfort during this pandemic. And I will just remain silent on whether I plan to give him back after Matt finishes business school. But with that, I will bring it to a close. I hope I haven't exceeded my time limit, and I just really appreciate the opportunity to be part of this morning. It really has been just an extraordinary morning with a bunch of extraordinary women. And Denise, thank you again for inviting me.
Thank you, Chris. And I'm not going to complain about the fact that you have difficulty saying no to me, just so we're clear. And now you all understand why Chris has been, and she's incredibly humble, in addition to being this calm, poised, amazing, strong woman and advocate for women. She really has been a mentor of mine since I met her coming to the chamber in 2006. So I am eternally grateful for her leadership and her mentoring. Does anyone have any questions for Chris that they would like to ask? Feel free to unmute yourself if you do. No?
Are you going to be distributing cookies?
Did you hear that, Chris?
I didn't, no.
Are you going to be distributing cookies?
Well, only if Tara comes back and distributes cupcakes. Yeah. And then we can remember avoid the donut vendor slide.
And speaking of dogs, Helene, notice who's right here beside me? Okay. I don't have a dog. I'd like a dog, but apparently Rick thinks he gets to usurp that decision. So I took one of Colleen's amazingly adorable dog, Willie, because I just love his squeaker toy. It's a little piggy. And that has been my source of relaxation during Zoom meetings. So
That little piggy sounds just like my bulldog sitting here by my side.
he does. Rick's not very fond of him, but I rather enjoy him.
Exactly why I sent him home with you.
I know. We all get pleasure where we can right now.
Yeah.
I have a question for you. Your calm slide very much resonated with me. I tend to be kind of a nervous tick kind of gal. How do you will yourself into calm? What are your methods for calming yourself down when things explode around you?
Wow, that's an interesting question, Jess. You know, I think the first thing is, you know, you take a deep breath. I think if you can immediately remind yourself that your ability to get through it is directly linked to the people who are around you at that moment. So if your first reaction is to lash out or to be accusatory or to panic, it inhibits your ability to process any information, and it changes the relationship that you have with the people that are most important to you at that moment. I think there is a bit of a, you know, putting a really distinct wall up in life. Now, what I learned through that, because that is it for me, it was very much a learned skill. At some point, that wall has to come down, and all of the angst, anxiety, stress on the other side has to get processed. You're just saying, you know, I can't do it now. and you become trained not to do it now, but at some point you have to do it. And I had a few situations actually after going through an incredibly stressful experience where my husband said, I can't believe, you did that and you were a rock and all that. I actually got shingles after 2 of them, which is the evidence of the stress finding a different way to come out, that if you're not going to let it come out, it's going to find its own way. So you have to be really, that was the second learning for me, is if you get really good at putting that wall up and saying, I'm going to manage through, and then when you get to the other side of the crisis, you've still got to process all that stuff that was there. So
Interesting. Okay. And very helpful to me too. Thank you.
sure.
Chris, I have a question for you. So you took your new role officially, was it April 1st?
So January 1st, I took over enterprises, and then June 1st, I added the foundation in there. Yeah.
So
Yeah, great timing, huh?
That's what I wanted to ask you. Like, did you not, at the point when we went down on lockdown and we knew that, we were really in a storm, did you not go, holy, shit, what did I just do?
Yeah, it's I think anybody who was a leader at that time, I think no matter how much experience you had in your role, this isn't one that anybody could prepare for. So in some ways, there was no playbook for any of this, and there wasn't for anybody. So that was kind of, it wasn't like I was being put in a situation that my predecessor, Tom Tranter, would have been able to do with his eyes closed, because he'd done it 100 times. I think we were all really just in such new territory. And in some ways, boy, you want to talk about coming on board quickly. It wasn't a bad way to get established in that role. And, the first thing I did was, collect the right people. And that really saved it. So.
Well, we are incredibly lucky to have you at the helm for Corning Enterprises and for all the work and support that you have lent during this crisis. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. And it was really hard to be leading a community, the community arm of Corning Inc., and watching what was happening to all of our businesses. And, it was really heartbreaking. And I have to say, that took a few weeks before I got a full night's sleep. It was really, it was just heartbreaking. So, being able to get to a point at which I could say, okay, we can do this. It was a rough couple of weeks in my house. So.
I have a quick question for Chris.
Of course.
How do you balance work life? I mean, is that something you work on all the time, or do you have a really good system in place and it comes natural for you?
Yeah, so Shelley, at this point in my life, my kids are grown and gone. Well, actually, I had one that came back, as we talked about earlier. My New York City son has been living with us since March. It's, as he calls it, his version of a dystopian novel, coming back and living with his parents. I will say, when my kids were growing up, it was a daily challenge to balance things. And in the introduction, Denise talked about sort of the 2 parts of my career. I spent my first 20 years in finance and then moved over to Corning Enterprises. That was a work-life decision. I reached a point, my kids were still in grade school, and I was working 80 hours a week. My husband was doing the same. And I, quite frankly, was ready to walk away because I just couldn't balance anything anymore. And so at that point, I scaled back to part-time. I was lucky enough to have an opportunity to do that. And that's how I kind of got things back on track. But it is a daily struggle when your kids are at home. And honestly, I just have so much respect and admiration for parents who are doing this now, and having to make those really impossible choices of being dedicated to your kids and your kids' education and having so much responsibility there and still trying to get a job done. So I worry about, quite frankly, what this is going to mean for women long term. We've spent a long time getting to where we are, and women are bearing the not in all cases, but in many cases are bearing the holding up the bigger load at home with kids and education in addition to their jobs. So yeah, but it's just a constant thing.
Yeah, Chris, there's a question specifically around that. Someone asked how do you manage when you have somebody that's 16 online, stressed out, overloaded, third week of school? How does that what do you do for them to help them move forward and be successful in this whole new world we're in?
Wow. So I would call Renee, actually. her number,
Yes.
the chat box. Yeah, I don't know that I have a lot of good answers for that, because unfortunately that's what's required right now for kids to go to school. I said something to my husband early on in this. I said, I wish they just sort of waved off this school year and said, okay, kids, let's just do a life skills year. Don't try and do virtual learning. But of course, that's not realistic either. Yeah, so I'm afraid I will turn the platform over to Renee on that one.
Right.
I think Renee had to exit. She had another
She
commitment.
did. She had a new appointment. She had to get ready.
Yes.
Right.
So, but I'm sure if you reach out to her, I'm sure she'll have some resources and advice that would be very helpful for this particular time.
Yeah.
Any other final questions for Chris before we move to the next? Okay. Thank you so much, Chris, and for making time in what I know is an incredibly busy schedule for you. So now we're going to conclude the session with a little interactive activity. And for that, I'm going to turn it back over to Judy.
Yes, thank you, Denise. I really appreciate it. For everyone, just so you know, in the chat, if you can see the chat, I think most of you can, I want you to click on the link because, when we were talking about this, we said Zoom is hard for interaction, but I was very honored that the group wanted to try something new. And so look at the chat, click on that link, and then I'd like for you to answer in a few words, what is one takeaway that you plan to own it beyond this conference? What do you plan to own or do or think or feel, or, even if it's just like take a nap, because Renee talked about, taking care of yourself, or, like Chris talked about, being surrounded by the right people. And certainly the panel talked about owning your own feelings around advocacy for inclusion and for making sure that you're educating yourself around racism and all the other elements of diversity. What do you want to take away? We'd love to hear from you. By the way, no one can tell what your answer is, and we do not check spelling. As you can see in my chat, I'm spelling challenged sometimes, especially when texting. So please put your comments in, and we'd love to have a look at this. And we'll save this for prosperity, and then we'll be asking you for feedback for the overall event, because this is new for all of us. Oh, look at that. Own my own humanness is wonderful. Be the best ally. Relaxation is a priority. Ask for help. Take calm time for myself. Meditation. Oh my gosh, look at all these wonderful, wonderful responses. Pausing, admitting mistakes, asking questions, anti-racist advocate, helping others, being in command. Meditation goes again, letting go. Meditation's in the middle, and compassion. Love that. The more people that say those words, the larger those words become in this Mentimeter, by the way, is what I'm using. And it is a tool that just captures really quickly ideas. Patience with my daughter, taking time to be calm. Look at that, still coming. Asking for help is wonderful. As women, we don't do that enough. Love spending time in nature, challenging yourself to be educated, calm, and even more calm. And just taking time, unplugging, all these wonderful ideas. So take another couple of seconds or so and finish up your ideas and your thoughts. You can share more than one if you'd like. If you had trouble, feel free to put one or two more in. I think you can do that. Ask is another word, self-care, being around light bringers. I love that. You know, it's okay. It's okay to not be okay, right? Breathing, compassion, kindness to all. Love it. Love it. So I'll be able to share this, save this. And then I'm sure with all the other materials, I would love to be able to share this with all of you. And Janet will do that. So thank you, Janet, for everything and coordinating everything. And thank you all for sharing your thoughts and ideas, self-care, own kindness, support to yourself.
Judy, are you able to show us the,
oh shoot, you guys can't see me because I didn't share it with you. I wish you had said something earlier. See how wonderful a plan comes together? I'm so sorry. You guys are like, what's she talking about? Here you go. Sorry about that. Oh my gosh. Do you see what you've created with all your ideas? And if somebody wanted to chat one more thing, can you put one more thing in the box? Then you can see how it grows when somebody puts something in. Can someone put something in on the link?
Hey,
I'm
Judy.
so sorry. Yes.
Is there any chance when this is all said and done, you could take a screenshot of that and send it to us?
Actually,
I love it.
Yes, isn't this amazing? And I'll also put mentimeter.com is free if you want to, upgrade. They always have upgrades, but this is an awesome way to capture ideas. And I will actually save the slide. It's an actual slide, presentation slide, and I'll give that to Janet, and Janet will put it in all the mini materials that we have. Do you see this? How awesome is this? Thank you all very much for participating. And I will turn it over for sponsorship acknowledgement back to Denise. So Denise, I'll stop sharing my screen and you can take it from there.
Thank you very much, Judy. I would be very remiss if I didn't thank the sponsors, which are around my head, for making this event possible. Janet does that so I can remember to thank people. I'm like a squirrel. So thank you to Apple Ridge Senior Living, to Excellus, Care First, Three Rivers Development, Corning Dental Associates. We couldn't have done this without you, and certainly to all our gift bag sponsors. If you were lucky enough to get a gift bag, please let us know. We make deliveries. We'll get them to you. I also want to thank my steering committee, because this conference happened because women believed with me, saw the vision. So thank you to Judy, to Janet, to Jess, Barb, Angela, and Christina, and did I forget anybody? Barb, I got everybody, right? Committee, everybody?
Ashley.
Ashley and Anita. Yeah.
And Judy.
I got Judy. Incredible team of women. They are a tribe for me. They are go-to. So everybody has to have a tribe. They are one of my tribes. If you are interested in being on the Own It committee, please let us know. We're always looking for fresh ideas, fresh perspectives, fresh energy. As Janet can tell you, we're a little hard to manage. Got some personality going on and some energy in the group. But we would welcome, if you are interested, please let us know. I think that's everything. And thank you again to our guest speakers. As I said earlier, these conversations are not always easy, but that was the point of this. It's a safe place to have discussion. It's a safe place to ask questions. And we look forward to 2021 when we can be in person and we can really, oh my gosh, to be a hugger and not be able to hug, it breaks my heart. So thank you all for everything that you do, for being the amazing women that you are. We are so lucky to have all of you understand what the amazing talents and gifts that you all are, not just to each other, but to this community and to your loved ones. And I want to leave you with a quote I was trying to debate on which one. As we talk about diversity, what sets you apart can sometimes feel like a burden, and it's not. A lot of the time, it's what makes you great. Thank you for all being the great women that you are. Thank you for sharing that with us and the time with us. And we look forward to seeing you all again very soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great day. Take care.
Thank
Be
you.
well. Stay safe.
It was
Bye,
absolutely
everybody.
fantastic.
Bye-bye. Take care. Good to see you all. Thank you for coming.
Did a great job, Judy.
Oh, thank you. I had a
Wonderful.
wonderful panel. I couldn't help it.
It
Yeah.
was a privilege to be part of this.
It's
Really,
a privilege to have you. We're so
Thank you,
delighted. Thank you.
Jennifer.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks to everybody. Bye-bye. Thanks to the committee.